The following program is brought to you in part by TCF, where Minnesota banks, and by K102, the FM country.
It's an old joke, but perhaps not without some substance. It goes, you know it's going to be a bad day when you show up at the office and there's the 60 Minutes crew waiting for you. Yesterday they showed up in Minneapolis and it did not turn out to be a bad day for the city. In fact, it seems the city turned out for them. They were arriving in response to an invitation of the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce to appear before the Chamber's annual meeting to answer questions from the public. This was at the Minneapolis Marriott Hotel. 60 Minutes has begun its 19th season on the CBS television network. Certainly the most durable, by far the most successful television news program in broadcast history. When they consented to make room in their schedules for Minneapolis, the CBS people themselves were flabbergasted. One executive told us, "That's amazing. We can't get them together for 2 minutes for a publicity photo." Well, that's all we needed. Who could ignore such a signal, such an opportunity? We'll turn our cameras on them. See how they like that. We'll stay with them all day long, every step of the way. And then the day following, on Tuesday night, we'll do a program. And we'll call it 60 Minutes with 60 Minutes. When the crew of 60 Minutes comes to town, rarely are they treated like pampered dignitaries or welcomed with such open arms. Could this be the vaunted team that makes crooks crumble, kings quake, and honest men sweat?
I'm Morley Safer.
Thank you very much.
I'm Harry Reasoner.
Hi, how are you?
I'm Ed Bradley.
Jim, how are you? Welcome.
In the bright sunshine of a mid-autumn day, this troupe doesn't look so tough. They're even docile. Though the entire cast was to attend, last-minute assignments sent Mike Wallace to Chile and Diane Sawyer to Libya to interview Gaddafi. Their first stop on this whistle-stop tour is the home of their sponsors, WCCO Television. Under the watchful eye of executive producer Don Hewitt, bringing up the rear as he does on the show, is Andy Rooney.
I'm just nervous I won't get back in time for the Giant game tonight.
This is the strongest station in the morning? Yeah.
Upstairs, a reception. There's light talk and polite, perhaps perfunctory smiles. And this bit of eavesdropping as the cast begins to unwind a bit. Harry Reasoner.
This is almost unprecedented. 60 Minutes sending more than one correspondent anywhere for a promotional deal. This is the second time I've heard about it in 18 years I've been on the air.
Andy Rooney on being a celebrity.
They want to talk to you, and they want to be your best friend, and they want your autograph or something. It's a pain in the tail. I don't care for it at all, and I'm not very gracious about it, I'm afraid.
And Ed Bradley on his world assignments.
Alexander the Great passed through here. You know, and here's a little kid from West Philadelphia standing in the Cairo Pass. You know, that's the kind of kick you can't get in the studio reading the news, as important as that is.
Then on to the green room, and another attempt to smooth the craggy lines of a road map face.
I think we should have a makeup artist traveling with the cruise.
I think that's a wonderful...
I work for the Minneapolis Times.
While the tables are turned on Don and Harry on the set of Newsday, Morley, Andy, and Ed are facing questions from the newspapers about the financial woes of CBS.
And it is almost always the financially sound news organizations that produce the best journalism.
Stand by. Quiet,
but before he leaves for the hotel, one last task for Harry.
It's been years since I lived and worked in this town, the Twin Cities.
A promo is taped for CCO's news. With less than an hour's rest at the Marriott, the crew is back at work.
You are like a movie star. Well, it's a little different. You know, I ski.
Each patiently shares the mic with CCO Radio's Steve Cannon and tapes a brief interview for this special.
I think I've got the best job in broadcast journalism.
4.5 hours after landing, a last-minute spritz and final second psych-up as the crew from 60 Minutes is about to embark on the showcase event of their whirlwind tour. And now, the executive producer and founder of 60 Minutes, Don Hewitt.
Thank you. We hope you're going to be nice to us because we're not nice to everybody else, so we'd like... Anyway, we've got them all here, either live or on tape. First of all, starting with the seniority, Harry Reasoner. Morley Safer. Morley? Ed Bradley. And here with all the little bottles and all the cotton, Andy Rooney.
We'll be right back with the 60 Minutes crew after this.
Mike Wallace is not here. Diane Sawyer is in Libya, or on her way to Libya, and possibly Damascus, trying to see Assad and Gaddafi. And Mike isn't here because, well, I don't know whether to tell you this or not, but Mike is in Don Frazier's office going through his files. Anyway, we brought Mike and Diane on tape, and if that tape's ready, why don't we hit that tape, and that'll take up the first 11 minutes, and then we'll let you go at us. They decided to go at each other the way we imagine you're going to go at us.
I understand that you used to be a weather reporter in Louisville, and about 15 years ago you came to the big city looking for a job, New York City, and you met Don Hewitt, and he told you to go back to Louisville.
That's true. He did. He did, and it just made me a better person.
Really, what did happen? You did?
Seriously, when I first came here?
Yeah.
And I saw Don here? You want to know everything that happened when I first came here? It's all right. It's not one of those stories, I promise you. What did happen is that I think he thought I was a complete idiot, a completely deluded idiot, wanting to come in off of the weather broadcast to do 60 Minutes. Now, what do you think? Do you think that if I'd started 10 years ago, that it would have been all right? Were you ready?
I think that you probably were very smart to go to work for Richard Nixon and to learn a little bit about Washington. How'd you get that job?
The job with Richard Nixon?
Mm-hmm.
Walked into Washington, D.C., called back to Kentucky, and said, you know, I'm in Washington, and there's this place that looks like it'd be really neat to work at. Seriously. And someone called someone in the White House to do it. But let me... What is going on here?
I'm interviewing you now. You're going to get me after a while. These are two separate interviews.
Who said you were going to go first?
I said I'm the senior one. Droit de seigneur. Now...
If you're so tough, how did you let Don Hewitt talk you into doing this? That's what I want to know.
You went out after the Nixon White House. You went out to San Clemente with Mr. Nixon to help with his book.
That's right.
Your years in the White House and with Nixon in San Clemente, what, if anything, did it teach you about broadcast journalism?
It taught me that the 4 worst words in the English language really are, Mike Wallace is here.
Come on.
No.
The papers quote
pretty
Don
soft.
Hewitt.
I was expecting some really tough stuff. Mike Wallace. They said, Mike Wallace is going to interview you. You know, I've been in the other room getting my anti-sweat powder out here.
Okay.
You know, how do I look?
The papers say that you make $800,000 working at CBS in 60 Minutes.
That's right,
and
Buster.
And now you want more. A, are you worth it? And B, how is your negotiation coming?
You know, I just did one thing. I went in and I said, just pay me what you pay Mike Wallace. And they said, there's not enough money in the world to duplicate that salary again.
How is your
Do you want to
negotiation?
head down this road any further? I think, yes.
How is the negotiation coming?
My current negotiation, it's only just begun.
But your contract,
Literally just
according to the
begun.
papers this morning, is up in 6 weeks, and you've just...
That's right, and you've already, I gathered, recruited all of my producers just in case, in case my contract lapses by the end of the year. And I'm looking the other way.
The other part of the story is that you are thinking of going to work over at ABC as co-anchor with Peter Jennings. Why would you want to leave the Tiffany Network? and work with Jennings.
Do I have to go through? Where is Don Hewitt? Do I really have to go through this?
Well, you asked.
I mean, do you realize that down this way lies self-destruction?
Your self-destruction.
What
or
do you
mine?
think I should do?
Oh, I think that you should stay where you are.
Well, and did you ever contemplate anchoring? Did you ever contemplate leaving 60 Minutes after it started on the great roll that it
Oh,
was
yeah.
on?
No, after the roll, no. For a while, I thought, about 6, 7 years in on 60 Minutes, that I wanted to go to Boston and teach. And I had a job at WGBH and a job as a kind of an associate at MIT.
Why did you want to do that? Was this just the fantasy of the reflective life? Or?
No. I thought that I'd had it with 60 Minutes, and it wasn't really going anyplace much. It was right after this that 60 Minutes then took off. But I thought very seriously about it. And Fred Friendly was saying, it's a good idea. I'll help you get the job, and I'll make sure that you work at WGBH and so forth. In any case, I didn't. Don has said...
Wait a minute. I'd like to finish this line of questioning, if I might.
Okay.
How would you really have felt if you'd been sitting there at MIT grading papers and we had been #1?
If I'd been there, you wouldn't have been #1. Don has said that you would have been hired even if your name was Tom Sawyer.
Do you believe that?
Honest? To begin with, probably no. Because the fact is that we were looking for a woman. This is going to sound so...
Is there a Gloria Steinem alert here?
Yeah, no, because, I mean, I don't know how to say this effectively, because you are so good, and so straight, and so intelligent, and such a joy to work with, and so good for the broadcast.
I thought you said Mike Wallace was
But
gonna
having
interview.
said that, I mean, we needed a female on this broadcast. But we weren't going to hire a woman simply because she was a woman, until Tom Sawyer came along.
I think if my name had been Tom Sawyer, it would have been pretty funny every night when I went on the air. Hi, I'm Tom Sawyer. Let me, are you finished yet, please?
No,
May I
go
have
ahead.
just a few moments
Sure.
here? Because it's a question that I get several questions about you, every time I go out. One of them is the standard one, which you might as well answer here, which is why the culpable sit down for interviews with you, which I'm sure is the question that you get more than any other one.
I think because they know they're going to get a fair shake. I mean, come on, 19 years later. And it's been 19 years. And no one has ever been subpoenaed to come on this broadcast. So if year after year after year people do it, they must feel that there's something in it for them. They're going to get an opportunity to get their own point of view across. They're going to get a fair shake. They're going to get a huge audience on probably the most prestigious show of its kind in America. So why shouldn't they come on? And most people who feel that they probably have a little to hide are either satisfied that we will not be able to dig and get it, and in addition, they can handle themselves.
That's simple.
Because you're an attractive woman, do you find that it is easier somehow, honest now, to get to talk to certain movers and shakers, certain figures? In other words, when Diane Sawyer's on the phone, is it a little bit easier because you're an attractive woman?
The only thing I can think of that makes it easier is their relief that it's not you.
No, come on, I'm serious. Serious.
Sometimes I think that it is intriguing. In other words, they're really, sometimes I think they're not quite sure that you're really calling simply to do the interview. Sometimes they're sort of curious about how a woman is going to handle what is supposed to be a fairly contentious interview sometimes. But after the first question, it seems to me that that difference is a difference, a distinction without a difference, maybe. After the first question, it's you're too institutional conversationalists, and it really doesn't make any difference anymore.
It's getting in the door that I'm talking about.
Getting in the door, you know, when I first went to the State Department, which was about the second or third assignment at CBS, and I was the first woman, I think, who'd covered it for the television networks full-time, for television networks. And there were some very good print reporters there, but television was still a bit of a novelty in that regard. I think that it was like, you know, if I'd had two noses and orange hair, it would have been about the same thing. It was just a little different. So that getting in the door initially, because of the simple curiosity, probably was a bit of an advantage initially. But again, that lasts for one phone call, lasts for one question.
Have you ever had indecent suggestions made to you by interviewees? In other words, you really want a story,
You did
Diane?
right here, Droit Seigneur. I mean, come on. And it's on tape.
Would you, ma'am, I mean, would you really like a story, ma'am? For instance, when this is being broadcast in Minneapolis, or being shown in Minneapolis, you're going to be with Muammar Gaddafi.
That's right.
Now, you know, good-looking man, right?
Is he to your taste? I'm not sure.
Not a good-looking man? You don't find him attractive to a man?
I'll tell you, too disturbing to judge that way.
Now, you're in the tent, out in the desert, with the dates and the whatever.
And the breezes in the palms.
That's correct.
Right. Well, you know, you've read the stories, haven't you, about the things he's done with other female reporters?
Yes. No. Things he's tried to do, you mean?
Well, yeah, the passes he's made.
Yes.
You know,
what do you do?
He has sort of a neighboring tent, I gather, in which the lights are dim. What do you do?
Yeah. First of all, has this ever happened?
I'll tell you, I think with
Has this ever happened? Hold it. Has this ever happened?
Oh, dear, can I tell this? I will tell you, without a name, that it happened once during an interview, and a very difficult interview to get, and one that I really wanted a lot. And late at night at home, I got a call, which some might interpret, you know, if you were very sensitive to these. The thing is, he was 85 years old at the time, and it hardly seemed to be something worth making a federal case out of.
Ted Turner?
Ted Turner? No. Ted Turner?
That's what I heard.
Are we going to get Shirley MacLaine?
Oh, no.
No.
Brother and sister.
No one ever make a pass at Mrs. Reagan?
Brother and sister. Cousins. True.
The blood is running thinner and thinner the more we talk. I'm sure you've had women make passes at you.
I am aging gracefully, and no one makes passes at a man of my years.
There is a rumor afoot that you have the fountain of youth stored someplace in your cabinet in your office every night.
Anytime, Diane, that you would like to find out. Now then.
Yes. Going back to what you were saying earlier about why people come on 60 Minutes and why those particularly who are ripe for the assault, the plucking, yes, exactly. I love Morley Safer's line that a crook really hasn't made it as a crook unless he's appeared on 60 Minutes. I think we've...
Cut. That's perfect. That's it.
To paraphrase what Diane just said, a crook hasn't made it as a crook until he's come before the Chamber of Commerce in Minneapolis. There they are. If you have any questions, go ahead.
I'd like each of you to play futurist. I'd like you to reflect for a moment and tell us what pattern of events or trends that you see that might not be generally recognized that are emerging.
I told you we shouldn't come here.
I left my crystal ball in New York. I yield to seniority.
The only pattern I see is beginning to be generally recognized, I think. I first saw it in reading business magazines, which I do, which is the most pessimistic thing you can say, and I don't know that it's justified, is that Americans are rapidly getting to a situation where we can't make anything anymore. And just in the last few weeks, more and more people are noticing that. We gave up making cameras and television sets, and The question is, how long can we go on being wealthy and comfortable and with a high standard of living making only hamburgers?
I see a trend that has irritated and angered me for years and also saddened me. And that is the fact that it follows up Harry's remark, but we are selling things better than we're making them in America. And it's a dangerous thing. I had an experience a year or so ago. I have this old station wagon, 1977 wagon, and I live in this small town in Connecticut. And I wanted them to do all those things they do to a car when they charge you $63 and you don't know what they've done. They said service it. And so it was Saturday morning is the day I have to do that sort of thing. So I called the Ford place in my nearby town, and I phone answered, and I said, could I have the service department, please? And the fellow says, the service department isn't in Saturday. It's the sales department. What can we do for you? And my question is this. If I can buy a car on Saturday, why the hell can't I get one fixed on Saturday?
Okay, so much for trends and patterns. There's the gentleman right over there.
Two questions, actually. First of all, what are you doing on Sunday night when the show airs? Do you sit and watch yourselves? And second, could you explain a little bit about how you tape the segments? Are you all together at the same time? What day are the segments chosen? Are they chosen a couple days ahead of time, or what?
I can tell you what I did this past Sunday. I was in Philadelphia visiting family, and I was catching a train to come back. I returned the rental car, watched the first piece parked in the rental car outside of 30th Street Station in Philadelphia, ran in to catch the train, caught Diane's piece, and then by the time Harry's piece came on, I was out of range of my portable television set. That's what I did this past Sunday.
My family and I sit and watch the show, and I do what Don's old friend Lyndon Johnson used to do. I talk back to everybody's pieces. You know, generally it's two mediocre quality pieces and one superb one. And I nod. I don't talk back to I just nod because I want everyone in the room to catch every nuance of it. And I say things like rubbish to the rest of them.
I often miss it and miss parts of it and feel terrible about it. I go around feeling terrible all week because I missed it, and usually find a way to see it some later time.
I know that would drop you more often.
I hear about that when you drop me.
Yes, sir.
What do you attribute a lot of the success of the show to? NBC's tried a number of shows. ABC's finally coming into some success with 2020. Why has 60 Minutes been so successful?
Pure dumb luck. No, a lot of luck goes into it. It's a freak. It's an aberration. It'll probably never happen again that 6 people caught on in the reality end of television, and I don't know if any of us can really explain how it happened,
Don,
why it
happened. I don't think this is your question to answer.
That's the answer. Go ahead. You know so much about it?
This guy has just got some strange quality that has enabled him to produce a better show than anybody else produces. He cares about it. He's more interested in it than any other producer I ever saw on a show. And Don just sticks at these things until he gets them right. And the show comes off better. I think all of us have seen pieces on 2020 and on whatever the NBC magazine show is called this year. And quite often there is one that could just as well be on 60 Minutes. We'd be proud to have it. But consistently, Don just comes up with, he's tougher on pieces than most people and knows better what he wants.
I think that Andy has a kernel of it, of what the reason for the success of it is. I think an awful lot of passion goes into this broadcast. And by that I mean everybody who works on it feels quite proud of this broadcast. And not just the people you see up here, but the producers and the messenger kid genuinely feels part of a team. Don is probably the most irrational man I know. There is no structure to this broadcast. There are no meetings. There are no memoranda. And if occasionally he writes one, the next one says, I didn't mean the first one. If he wasn't doing this broadcast, he'd be locked up. I know it.
I have to say, in all modesty, too, that 60 Minutes did survive when I left it after 2.5 years. But especially in view of a couple of things Mike said, I have to say in all candor that it was never #1 till the first full year I was back. Probably just coincidental.
60 Minutes with 60 Minutes continues in a moment.
Yes.
Hi, when choosing a piece, when you're choosing a story, how do you choose the story? You must get hundreds of suggestions and stuff. How do you choose priority? What do you enjoy covering?
There's a kind of very personal, private, even selfish element in this, and it's what makes the hackles in your neck rise. It's what you find amusing. It really has to be that. There are just too many stories out there. And so the selection process is an extremely unscientific one. And then once I'm mildly excited about it, I have to go and then excite him. And sometimes we scream at each other, and sometimes I win and sometimes I lose.
Mostly, I always assume that if it's a story one of you is really interested in doing it, it's going to be well told and it's going to be interesting.
And there are also other people, the people you don't see, the producers we work with. A recent example, I have a producer who I think is probably the best producer I've ever worked with, who came to me with a story idea several months ago, and I said, I don't think I'm interested in that story. She came back and said, listen, I know this is a good story. And given her track record, I said, fine, let's do the story. Because I have that much faith and confidence in her that I'm willing to give in to her judgment and her gut instinct that this will be a good story.
Yes?
I was brought up under the belief that you learn a lot more reading than you do watching TV.
Just keep it. Don't lose it.
I was wondering, since you use the TV as your medium, how much TV should the average person in America watch, and how much should they read?
Dr. Major?
The strange thing is, I keep hearing that libraries, more books are being taken out of libraries now than ever before, despite television. So I don't know how these people, I keep hearing about people that watch television like 10 hours a day. I find that difficult to believe, though there are statistics that say people do that. I find that unbelievable to me, but I guess...
It also depends on what you watch on television. It depends on what you read. You can watch trash for 7 hours, or you can read trash for 7 hours. Depends you get out of it, what you put into it.
Well, I personally think people should do a lot more reading than they do. I have a new book coming out next year. I also think, though, that for all the trashing of television, I've argued with Morley about this, for all the trashing of television, that people in America are better educated and better informed than they were 30, 40, and 50 years ago. They have been exposed to so much information in so many different ways through television. And I confess that the ones who have profited most from the education they get are those in the lower brackets of our educational system. I don't think the average college-educated person is going to learn a whole lot from television.
Yes, I don't know. I think that the news does a very good job. I think the rest of television, generally speaking, really stinks.
Well, if you pick around,
and I'm taking Harry's point about we don't know how to make anything anymore. Your point. We only know how to copy ourselves. And if you look at the general wash of television, there's very little inventiveness. There's very little genuine creativity. Every once in a while, something comes along that you find compelling, like, say, a Hill Street Blues.
But it's the same quality as everything else, Morley. We're shoveling this stuff into the television set. We are making television broadcasts as well as we're making carpets or electric lights or chairs or anything else. There's a level we reach in this country, and we are doing everything at roughly that same level. And the television broadcasts are as good as the books we're publishing, with certain exceptions. Yeah.
Listen, you know what's principally wrong with television, I think? I think the public is really what's wrong with television. They expect too much from it. I mean, it's a lousy home appliance you buy for $500. You amortize it over 5 years. It costs you $100 a year. Now, you can't tell me that you don't get $100 a year worth of enjoyment out of that set. I think the problem is when you think you're going to get $100 a night out of it. And if that's what you want, it isn't there. Nobody gets those kind of odds. I mean, let's think, you know, and everybody sits around and they talk about the television set. And nobody, you know, you paid less for that than you paid for the couch. You don't sit around and talk about your couch all the time. I mean, it's taken over your life. And I don't know why. I don't know why you don't turn it off. Yes?
I'd love to know, for each of you, what was your most embarrassing moment during an interview that you care to tell us?
I once fell asleep in the middle of an interview.
I'll tell you the most embarrassing thing ever happened to Morley. Morley and I were coming out of a White House dinner, and I'm standing out, we're both in evening clothes. I go out first, and I'm sucking on a chocolate lollipop that Gretchen Poston, Mrs. Carter's press secretary, gave me. And Morley walked out with this nice old gentleman, and there I am sucking on my lollipop. And Morley walked up and he said to the man, he said, "Well, there's the man who produced the show, tell him." And Morley said to me, "He thinks our show is terrific. He watched it every Sunday." And I said, "Well, thank you very much, sir, but I'm afraid I didn't catch your name." And he said, "I'm Chief Justice Warren Burger." Morley almost went right through the sidewalk.
More of 60 Minutes with 60 Minutes after this.
What advice would you give to a young journalist trying to break into the field of news broadcasting?
Go, young journalist.
Be in the right place at the right time. It requires a certain amount of talent. It requires a certain amount of good luck and a lot of hard work. And I've always found that the harder I work, the better my luck is.
I think sticking at it, too. I think that we've all seen a lot of young people come in. It's such a popular thing to do these days, being television. I think that if you are not turned off, I hear so many young college people who want to get into television that I often wonder how any of them make it. And yet, even around our own shop, I see people that I didn't ever think would even get their jobs at CBS who are now doing very well. I think you have to be persistent more than anything.
Go to work for radio stations is good. If you want to learn good journalism, they used to say go to work for a small newspaper. Go to work for a good local radio station. You'll learn how to broadcast and report at the same time.
I guess I'm glad I don't have to do it now. I do think now you probably have to have your college degree. Andy and I didn't when we got jobs, but that was World War II. Now you've got to have a college degree. And if the University of Minnesota would see fit to give me mine, instead of arguing about it.
They're talking about it, Harry. You know that?
Yeah.
I bet they vote against you.
They did.
Yes, there's somebody over there in the shadows.
My question is to Mr. Rooney. I noticed out in the lobby that you refused to sign an autograph unless it was for one of your books. Theoretically, the guy that wants that autograph pays at least part of your salary every time he opens a can of beans or buys a car. Isn't that part of your job?
No, I don't think it is.
Hey, Anna, we're for you. I didn't plan him, Andy. I swear to God.
I do the best I can with what I write and what I do, and I don't think I owe anybody who wants my autograph. It makes me feel like an idiot putting my name on a blank sheet of paper, and I have no interest in doing it, and I do not do it.
I feel like a bigger idiot saying to someone who is showing some modest bit of praise for whatever it is I do or we do, to look that person in the eye, perhaps you don't look them in the eye, I don't know, and say, no, I don't give autographs.
I feel badly
I think
about
it's
it
crude.
sometimes.
I think it's damn crude to not do it. Don't you think it's crude?
I feel badly about it sometimes, yes.
Yes.
I was wondering how you came up with the early Sunday evening time slot for the show. It seems
Given the choices you had, Don.
rather unusual time for this type of show. And was it did you simply stumbled across it, or was it a tactical move? And how many families' Sunday dinners do you think have ended up with the family arguing over who was right or wrong?
We hope so. How do we get on 7 o'clock Sunday? Well, it was sort of a tactical thing. They came to us and they said, we'd like to put you on 7 o'clock Sunday. And we said, are you out of your mind? It's a terrible time. And it worked. And it's one of those chemical things that the chemistry and everything was right, and it works. You look like you're going to ask another question.
Yes, if they put Miami Vice on at 7 o'clock, would you stay in that slot?
No, we'd probably get knocked out of it. We've never had any real competition, and we're very lucky. We don't minimize the fact that we got where we got against, things like Punky Brewster, and I forget all the names of all those things. In fact, the fact that we once knocked Disney off the air kind of embarrasses us, because we don't think anybody should do that to Mickey Mouse. But yes?
How do your values affect your reporting, and do they ever get in the way?
They don't get in the way, I don't think. I think one's values can come under a certain assault when you happen to be interviewing someone who's wearing another hat you would find utterly despicable. But I think you've got to treat him with the same fairness that you do you might if you were interviewing someone whose values were more parallel to one's own. But I think it's not very difficult to set one's values aside in the course of doing a reasonably professional job.
I did. I did a lot, produced a lot of 60-minute pieces before I was on the air, and I've been a journalist enough of my life before I did this to. One of the things that I was never able to resolve in my own mind, and I don't know what the other fellows think about it, but the question of whether you come out in the open and tell somebody what you're after, when very often the stories that 60 Minutes does are not absolutely clear to the people they are doing the stories about. And it's sort of dead now, but are you obliged to reveal totally what you are after when you start interviewing somebody? I never thought you were, and it's been considered sort of dirty pool not to subsequently, but this is tangential to your question, but it's an ethical question that comes up all the time, I think, with people, and I never knew how to resolve it myself.
Well, I don't think you give them the specific questions, but I don't think you can get into other areas. I mean, we're coming to talk to you about your company, and you start asking about his problems with his wife. I mean, I think that's dirty pool. But I think if you say, we would like to talk to you about the troubles that you're having at the factory, but I don't think you have to let him know that you know as much as you do.
Well, I agreed. But I mean, there have been some people who have been saying in journalism schools that you do have to tell them everything. I don't think you do.
Yes, I have a question. Recently, I heard a local broadcaster speaker. He referred to his abilities in investigating a story. He felt he had the power to empower the public. I was wondering, in any given story, if you also felt the ability to empower the public.
I don't know what that means.
Empower?
Empower?
It's Midwestern talk, I understand.
Oh, really?
I think that runs into a very serious hazard for journalism, which is thinking you're going to do some good. The producers that work with me have one standard instruction, which is please do not bring any ideas that if we do them right will make the human condition a little bit better. The best quality of a good policeman is detachment, and the same thing is true of reporters. If we think we're doing good, we're probably doing it wrong.
The kick is getting the story. That's the kick, not the charge I think that we get. It's not, as Harry said, is not in making the world a little bit better. As a Swiss banker once said, if I worried about that, I'd be a priest, not a banker.
Yes.
Have any of you ever approached an idea for a piece, thinking you had a pretty good idea of who was wearing the white hat or the black hat, and then gone out and done the research, done the interviews, and found out that, in fact, your assumptions were 360 degrees wrong?
Every time.
First of all, you shouldn't go out making assumptions, and I guess you're human and you do, but you get fooled a lot. You
I think the assumption we go out on is that everyone's wearing a black hat, and then you find that there are various degrees of gray involved in the hats.
I think you wait till you get out on the story before you try to make up your mind. And I'm not sure there are white hats and black hats. I'm not sure that people aren't perceived by audiences as good or bad, and we don't perceive them as anything. And we just put them on the air, and they tell their own stories. And I mean, one of the things you run into was a lot of ideological white hats and black hats. You know, you get about half your audience wants to know, why do you beat up on President Reagan all the time? The other half says, why do you let him get away with that? So you're always, and you try not to get into one camp or the other.
I have a question about the comment on the impact of television journalism and whether or not it does or should do anyone any good. Or could you speak to the entertainment quality of television journalism as combined with the value?
Since I started that answer before, I don't mean that television journalism or any kind of journalism doesn't do any good, but it does good because it informs people and they make decisions. If you decide what is good for them, then you are exactly in the Russian tradition of journalism, which they defend very well, but which we don't like. Of course we do good. Of course we do good. If we didn't, we wouldn't last. But we don't go out saying we are going to make you better people.
The theory is that if all the truth about everything was known by everybody, it would be a better world. And any journalist who sets out to do a good thing is usually wrong. It's none of a journalist's business whether his piece does good or bad.
We'll be back in a moment.
Yes, I think there's a question over there.
Yes, I was wondering if you ever had a piece that you wanted to do and then didn't air it, and why?
No. I don't remember any time
We've
that
had failures.
Oh, we've had
pieces
stories that just didn't work.
Yeah.
But our scrappage rate is very low. It's maybe 2 stories a year, 3 at the most, that we get into and then abandon. But there's never been any pressure on us from any quarter, an advertiser or the network, to ever abandon anything.
And one of the nicest things about working at 60 Minutes, unlike other newspapers or television programs, is that there's no assignment editor at 60 Minutes. No one assigns a story. We are all responsible for our own story. Don doesn't sit there and dole out stories. And that makes working much nicer.
Thank God for that.
Those 2 or 3 stories that are thrown out every year, Don uses Super Bowl weekend when NBC has the Sunday night Super Bowl.
The years that NBC has a Super Bowl, you're always disappointed you don't have any dogs, because that's where you want to put them. Yes?
I have a question for Andy Rooney. Mr. Rooney, I listened to your interview with Steve Cannon out in the corridor here, and I noticed that you sat patiently while WCCO aired a traffic report.
No, I was sitting impatiently.
Sitting impatiently. Is it possible to become more successful and widely recognized to the point where a person doesn't have to sit through those things during a radio interview, or is there no hope?
Well, I'm telling you, I'm not very gracious as a I'm one of the least gracious, recently well-known people I ever knew. And my opinion of well-known people is a lot lower than it was before I got to be one, I'll tell you this.
Yes.
Given the current financial status at CBS News, do you ever wonder if the budget allotted to the show will be affected, and if so, will it affect the quality and success of the show?
Sure. But you find that the budgets given to shows enable them to, you know, it's a marketplace like anything else. I'm sure that the guy making cars at GM wishes he had more money for research and development, but they said that's what you got, that's what you got to work with. And they allot a budget for a show, and it's usually pretty realistic. And I think all the cutbacks that you're reading about at CBS will not affect what you see on the air. I think it's going to affect a lot of the peripheral things, and but I don't think anybody at home is going to even know that anything's been changed. So I don't think there are any big budget cutbacks where shows are concerned.
But the danger with any journalistic enterprise that becomes less successful is that they become less independent. I was saying to somebody before in an interview that there's a little paper in Colorado, the Aspen Flyer, and they have a great legend under their masthead. It says, independent as finances allow. and the best journalistic enterprises have always been the ones that were financially most successful. They can afford to reject advertising that they don't think is proper. They are absolutely above being influenced by advertisers, as 60 Minutes has always been and as CBS News has always been. But I think there's a danger in the future. I don't see it happening soon, but I think there is a danger that this could happen to television news in the future because of budget cuts.
Okay, should we make this the last one? I hope it's tough and nasty.
No, this is a nice one.
Oh.
This is for our Minnesota alumnus, Harry Reisner. I think one of the best news anchor teams that ever existed was Harry Reisner and Howard K. Smith. Do you ever miss those days, Mr. Reisner, and what is Howard doing these days?
Howard is retired and writing and doing some work occasionally for public television and other areas, and in excellent shape so far as I know. On weeks when I don't get a piece on 60 Minutes or when I have one and Mike Wallace has the lead with one of his things, yes, I miss it.
Thank you.
You know, I don't have a preference. The nice thing about 60 Minutes is that you can do all of these stories. You can do a profile of a celebrity. You can do a profile of someone who has an interesting story to tell. And in that sense, it's a profile because it focuses on one individual.
You think of stories where you got fairly close to important people. And then you think of stories where you were terribly scared and didn't cry.
But at some point, as I say, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, and you have to grieve at times. You have to hurt at times. You have to get angry at times. You try not to let it interfere with the story.
60 Minutes is a show about 5 reporters. 5 reporters who are more fascinating to the American public being themselves than Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman were playing Woodward and Bernstein. It's a show about reporters, and we take the viewer along on the story with us.
This program was brought to you in part by K102, the FM Country, and by TCF, where Minnesota banks.